In the previous video, we looked at this chart of these two variables that were somehow correlated. So they were both growing together. And because of this, we could draw this line and we could say, you know what, we can predict what is going to happen with the dependent variable, looking at what happens with the independent variable. And at the bottom of this inference that we're doing is the fact that there is correlation. By correlation, it means that the two quantities, the two magnitudes, are moving together in the same direction. They could also move in a different direction. Then you will have a negative correlation. But definitely what you're seeing is that there is a connection between the two of them. What is important is that there is a sensitive difference between saying these two things are correlated and to say these two things have a causal relationship. Because causal relationship means that if I can tweak the independent variable, then I can see a change on the dependent variable. And this is not always the case. This is not always the case. And sometimes the two variables depend on a third variable on causal basis or even on other variables. One way of verifying if there's actually a relationship between the independent variables and the dependent variables is to run experiments. Because with experiments, you can control for the different variables, and then you can actually have statistical confidence that changes in this realm will cause changes in this realm. And you can change and better understand what are the mechanisms that provoke those changes. And this brings us to the common mistakes that are being made with regression analysis. The first one is understanding if the results of these correlations that we are seeing, of this regression, these predictions that we are seeing, if there is some sort of actionable results that you can derive from it. Another common mistake is that the questions asked are just too wide. The problem with this is that there might be many variables that could contribute to the result that we are looking. And you can find many spurious correlationships in a process of looking through a wide space of variables. So if you don't go with really concrete questions regarding what is the relationship that I want to find, then you might get results that actually are not actionable because there's only correlation. There's no a causation relationship. As you can imagine, also the quality of the data that you are getting is going to be really important to understand the quality of the results of the analysis, the regression analysis that you're doing. If you just have some data that is not good, but the impact of this analysis is not that big, then it's okay to use data that is not perfect. But if you are making decisions that involve a huge budget or huge move in the way that you move your business, then better you make sure that the data you're using is clean and good enough. And this leads us also to the interpretation of the analysis. Look, in this regression analysis, there is a term that is the error term. It's important to understand that you are not always going to get exactly what the regression analysis is going to tell you. There's room for divergence of results. And the important thing to keep in mind is to separate the decision-making process with the outcome. Sometimes you might have made the right decision, but because the nature of these processes is probabilistic, you might not get the outcome that you expect. So if you, in your mind, you separate the two of them and you think, well, decision-making and results is not the same thing and it's all based on this probabilistic framework, you will be just fine. I want to close these reflections about regression with some ideas regarding intuition. Intuition is at the core of the decision-making process of many managers. Still, intuition might be tricky or might deceive us. Many of these processes, especially when you have probabilistic processes involved, are not intuitive, and our intuition might deceive us. However, there are many situations where you understand the business because you have domain knowledge, and you see a result that doesn't make any sense. Might be due, for instance, to some spurious correlation or something like that. In that case, you should really look deep into the data and perhaps, if it's possible, to run experiments to get the best result possible.